Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this morning's episode. I have just woken up from the unconscious, and I was, inspired to give an episode. I wanted to speak about something that not only is real to me, but I have a experiential reality for. You see, reality, you can say, is the depth of being animate as a form. And I find that there are two modes, or primarily, there are two modes of being on this planet, and a person can be in a simple state, which they are detached to the karma of the moment, or the person can be in a complex state where they are attached to the karma of the moment. Now, why would someone on this earth say in your simplicity the divine finds you? Is because I have noticed that the inner realms, in regards to how much stimulus, how much pressure that they are on, they either jump to the way our mind works is that if you entertain a certain perspective, if that perspective has pressure points in it and doesn't have a release point in the perspective, the whole perspective will release itself. And I'll give you an example of this. Imagine that you are a person who you suddenly think you're the strongest person on the planet. That sort of ego finds you. That hat falls on your head. And let's say you think you're the strongest person in this world, only to realize that in your attempts to become the strongest person or going towards that direction, either you will see you're not the strongest person, and if you were to become the strongest person, due to the nature of a realm where we even have surface tension, even if you roll an object on a table, the friction of the objects, the object and the table will make the object slow down. So eventually in any system, one reaches its breaking point, but it's all about how one reaches it. Anyways, oh my god. So guys, what I'm pretty much saying is that there's a simple way of looking at things. There's a complex way of looking at things. As the human being, we find ourselves, our mind simulating a reality inside a reality. So the mind is actually animating worlds inside a world. Now, if we choose to follow a world for a long time, we will eventually wake up from it, and then comes the sense of nostalgia. We can say pre-enlightenment is a pre-nostalgic state. Is a nostalgic state. The human being feels like their attention requires to be somewhere else, or is somewhere else. For example, me personally, in the moments where I've had enough with this world, in moments where I get fed up and things happen, and that, let's say, in front of your eyes, you're trying to do something, and the progression and the advancement of that thing you're doing goes a certain level, and then it stops. So in the outer realms, your expectations, let's say, were met 50%, or let's say your expectations were met 40%. That additional 60% belongs to the mind's life. And so there are things, or I would say moments, that the mind can access that the body cannot. And there are landscapes that the body can engage and feel and have sensory access that the mind can only watch from a distance. You know, I was clarified by of this only in ancient mysticism, when I realized that in certain mystical circles, metaphysical schools of thought, in certain metaphysical schools of thought, they have this approach that they are not only a soul, but that the soul is not stationed in the body. And because the awareness moves beyond the limits of the body, the soul is in some sense the witness of the life. What that means is, it's as if like imagining yourself standing beside yourself this whole time that you have been physically yourself. It would be a sort of metaphysical angle like that. I have experienced a sort of nostalgia in this life where I think maybe not a lot of people have commented on it. It is not the nostalgia of how free the mind was before the body arrived, but it is more a nostalgia of what is than what ought to be, you know? It's an example of a human being, for example, living in a natural biological world, and in the future, children might be born in cyberspace first. And when they are born in cyberspace, or let's say you lived, let's say, till the age of 5 in the outer realms, in the biological, natural outer realms, and then in the future, at the age of 6, you went from age of 6 to, let's say, 10 in cyberspace. So you lived 4 years in cyberspace, and you lived, let's say, I don't know, I'm just trying to say whatever amount that you have lived in the outer realms, if you start living in the inner realms and then you start living in the outer realms, you will have a nostalgia for the inner realms. This is simply just the activation of intelligence to itself in accordance to its sharpest memory. Sometimes what we think is a memory is an ultimate reality where all the illusions are accessing. I have personally, as a human being in this lifetime, gone through practices, and just the ideology was around me, and eventually the curiosity for it found me too, that I began asking myself, who was I before my earliest memory? And so, to my surprise, the answer, or what I was looking for behind my earliest memory, ended up becoming something that is not content-based, but it is the space for the content. So what that means is, imagine all of us, we actually have lived eons as a blank page. But suddenly, when you write something on this blank page, there is the personality, there is the lifetime, there is the incarnation. So the whole time that we are reading the words of our life on this blank page of our consciousness, there is a nostalgia for the blank page of consciousness. And if you pay attention, the mind has an instantaneous ability to animate. What that means is, right now in my inner realms, I can envision a jetpack on my back, and I'm on my balcony and I can see myself flying into the sky. But that is in my inner realms. In the outer realms, realms technology is not there, but in the inner realms it was possible. Why? Because your imagination is a consequenceless domain of reality manifestation, but it's subtle. You know, there's a quote by Leonardo da Vinci I often quoted in these talks where he says simplicity is the most ultimate sophistication. And Da Vinci has this other quote where I don't remember the exact wording, but I remember the imagery where he was saying that time stays for as long as the person needs it. Some idea like this, that reality is actually internally the meaning of reality is internally managed, but in the outer realms you get the alphabet for the words the mind creates. That means the elemental reality, the sensory reality, the color we see, the depth and dimensions of space that we see. These are in some sense the content that the mind can animate itself with. And it's honestly a speed thing. We don't realize it. What man called divine or of ignorance, right, was actually the speed of the inner realms and outer realms. When your mind moves faster than your body feels like it is involved in a transcendental activity. When your body moves faster than your mind, your intelligence feels as if it is being pulled by the world. So ultimately, for all human beings, there is two states. This of simplicity and complexity has to do with the push-pull. We define a force in physics, for example, as a push or a pull, but I would say when it comes to ideological identity, anytime we are we are complex, we are pushing reality. Anytime we're being simple, we are pulled by reality. This is a very key principle in yoga. Like, I don't know, like everybody probably knows this instinctually on some natural level, that some moments, if you get involved, the moment becomes complex and the whole moment doesn't go forth. But some moments, if you are simple, the karma transitions quickly. So think of it this way, that I'm a person telling the listeners that it's not that I have found a way to control karma, but it is I have found a way to fluctuate the speed of reality. What that means is, if in the outer realms reality is intense, the inner realms require to take a step back. If the inner realms the reality is intense, the outer realms require to take a step back. This would mean that if a person is in this world and their psychology is on the brink of chaos, they, in some sense, the outer realm, the physical reality, has to take a step back from them, and they need to take a step back from reality, right? If a person in the outer realm, let's say you're some sort of street fighter, unlucky street fighter, so you would be in a situation where reality shapes us, our attention takes us to the reality that shapes us pretty much. In simple moments, you can distinguish what is from the intelligence of the person and what isn't. That means in all the moments where I have been contemplating or inquiring about my mind, I know that the inner realms can get influenced by anything in the outer realms. You could be giving a lecture on psychology, and a bird passes by, and for a moment your whole attention of your psychology is shifted. That's the type of creatures we are. We are traveling inside the space-time continuum, but through two dimensions of it simultaneously. If the speed of the inner space of man, if we're moving quicker in the inner space, that's another way of saying where it's as if we are world jumping. And if we were to move in the outer space, we're jumping in the world. something I should probably read in case people require it. The dictionary defines nostalgia as a sentimental longing or wistful affection for a period in the past. And what it means is everybody who wants to go to heaven, the religious population on the earth, they are all nostalgic, but they are nostalgic of an event that in some sense was put in their mind. You know, there is this concept that the child cannot be born without the influence of the world. So that means on some level, everybody has a sort of abstraction being taken for reality in their intelligence. You know, it's kind of impossible. I mean, because the idea of ourself is as fiction as the characters in movies, especially when the universe is found in an MTA context. Sometimes I wonder how many human beings in history have attempted to be real in different ways, you know? There's so many of us here, and there's so little we know about the inner workings of humanity that really our choice in this life is just to go forth, like ultimate wisdom just is to keep going. But where? And that requires consciousness. You know, in my inner nostalgia, I'll share it with the audience because we're all alive once, and who knows what tomorrow and the days after will be like. But I will share it in the sense that I have had an inner self nostalgia of a galactic identification. I've had an inner self nostalgia of beyond the human framework. I have had moments where not that I have felt like I am God, because that's carelessness. I have felt moments of union, but in these moments of union, like a chess game, the world was moving before my inner realm. So you can say the speed of your mind can go so slow that when the world changes, you feel that is divinity. That can happen. But there is also internal objects that are intelligent. What that means is, what do we find in the outer realms? We find in the outer realms that there are creatures of their own independence. Now, in the inner realms, we just constituted to the personality that the person has accumulated, you know, like a film camera, what they've seen. But I'm telling you, when you go look at the film in the inner realms, there are intelligent internal objects that are independent of your way of opening to them. And what that means is it's like our second access. That means just like we have underwater and on land as two distinctions of dimensions, you can say that when we're on land, we come across a different type of intelligence, and when the scuba diver is swimming underwater, they find a different sort of aqua life intelligence, you know. So underneath water, the ability of movement is different, right? When a person swims underwater, it is very different than being able to like run on land, right? But what do you access in water that you don't access on land? An ability to shift angles, right? On land, the person can't just suddenly, stand on their hands easily. But underneath water, you can easily do a handstand. So when it comes to your inner realms, your mind, it is like in going in water where there's way more access to instantaneously shift your attention, but in the outer realms the delay is ridiculous. In the outer realms, like you can in some sense perceive something in your inner realms, and in your outer realms it could happen like a few minutes later, or it can in some sense arise a few minutes later. That means it begins to happen for you. And so the mind is living a second life. I gave an episode on this, but this is the biggest thing, that this whole time we have been alive, our inner life and our outer life have been different. Or when it comes to image, our outer life has been conditional. That means it's based on what's there, that there is something we see. But in the inner realms, even if there isn't something there, you can still put in their thought. You can visualize, and visualization is an extension of one's intelligence. That means when I give these talks, sure, on one level I'm a human being with an online alias saying, sharing ideas, but on another level, what I'm doing is that I'm actually, like, my mind is dancing. And when my mind is dancing, I am sharing this. And what do I mean my mind is dancing? When a person dances, they trust the rhythm of the moment's intelligence, and they just go forth. Like I am telling you, life cannot be planned because we don't have all the information. So whatever plan we make, in some sense, will have loopholes, in the sense that we're in a changing world, right? So after one lives through a strategizing mode of realism, they will eventually come to realize that nature has a divine quality that is untouchable. That means there are some states where only through non-interference the person can access. What do I mean by non-interference? It's like a state of mind where you're sitting down, and like a Sinbad kind of novel, it's like a giant eagle is picking you up, right? So the whole idea of it, I would say, is like, when the giant eagle picks you up, divinity came towards you. You didn't go towards divinity. I would categorize like all metaphysicists like this. There's ones that they are going towards the unknown, and there are people where the unknown is going towards them. And I would categorize myself as someone who the unknown came towards, and now I am going towards the unknown, And because it's inevitable, I mean, I might as well, because we're temporary, everybody dies on in this world, we have to explore as much as we can before the candle flame goes out, The opportunity of life is too rare to just be a passenger, and even though certain states require just you are not the creator. You know what it is? It's as if, imagine a bunch of gods. This is, I'm speaking through a polytheistic sense now, through a polytheistic lens of vision. Imagine there were 8 billion gods. There were endless gods, and these gods got bored. They were the ultimate. They're like, okay, we're the ultimate. What do we do now? And as 8 billion gods, they began simulating reality. So imagine there's a ball in the hand of like baseball players are practicing for the game, throwing the baseball, and I would say it's as if God's throwing reality in the void, a sort of similarity of metaphor. And so we are actually living in the mind of endless influencers of this realm, even factors of influence that are not human, right? That means it's as if the person, like sometimes when people behave, you see their human reaction of getting upset, right? Oh my God, why did that person do that? What is this? Oh my God, there's that sort of reaction. But then there's some moments where let's say suddenly you're walking and you don't have an umbrella and it starts raining. And it's as if, how angry can you get at weather? You see, the things that are not in our control, we don't even bother having an emotion about, right? But the things that are in our control, we become hyper emotional. So you can say the people on this planet who are the most emotional are people who have concluded something to be in their control, which is out of their control, right? Like life and death, that's out of our control. We just appeared, and at some point we will exit, right? That's the crazy thing about life, if I feel like if I became a time traveler in the future, my time traveling self would come back and just say, it's like, yo man, the future is crazy, and then it would leave, in the sense that it is beyond anything that we can expect. You see, another word for divinity is what you have not seen yet, or what automatically enters consciousness. And there is an incredible comment, guys. Welcome to the chat section. Ruth says there are many out there who are absolutely convinced they have been woken to a new self. Even my mother came downstairs one day and said to me nonchalantly, I've been changed. Yeah, let me tell you why. Because we're antennas. And in reality, it is designed to change. That means technically every day we wake up is an enlightenment. You can say it hilariously, a micro enlightenment, where light enters your eyes again, and existence appears. Existence stands before you. I am telling you, a lot of stress, suffering, anxiety, depression will instantly evaporate the moment you try to discriminate what you can change and what you cannot. It's as if sometimes I've talked to people to try to bring them out of their, self-depreciating kind of mental habits. And you know what I've realized? I've realized it is just the roar of the soul. Life changes when your soul roars. That means the biggest thing that changes one is recognizing we're temporary. That is like the biggest, I think if I have kids, my kids will have a birthday where the boxes of the gifts are empty, and my kids in the future are going to be like, what is this? You gave us an empty box, and I'll be like, children, this is the secret of the universe I'm giving you in this box. That what emptiness is the uncontrollable factor. That means right now I am speaking, I am giving a live stream. After this moment, it's as if when the live stream finishes, it's as if I didn't exist. As if I'm not here anymore. It's as if whatever was the animate conscious moving force, the prime mover, as certain texts refer to it, the prime mover in some sense disengages abstraction and realism to actually reanimate. So our minds are behaving like a phoenix, so Mr. Within's going to just raise his hand in the species and say, hey guys, I found a phoenix everywhere. The universe is, the periodic table is reincarnating, for God's sakes, Because to a scientist, that's what Buddhists believe in, So a scientist would look at a Buddhist and be like, look at this person, believing that atoms reincarnate as a fixed personality beyond the material realm. But I'm telling you, the suggestion of how an electron went towards the complexity of being a mind can only be a testament that it's intelligence. It's intelligent. What that means is there will come maybe a global pantheistic shock at some point in our human history. And pantheism is the suggestion that everything is alive. Everything. Every moment, even the inanimate is conscious, not just animals. Imagine the person doesn't like animal cruelty. It's like, I want to be a vegetarian. Then the person realizes plants are conscious, and the person's like, what? Oh man, and then you stop being vegetarian, and the person realizes, oh my God, atoms are conscious. And then you just realize that in order to be a good person, you have to be completely immobilized, as if everything is good from the beginning and you shouldn't do anything. That is the sort of goodness we are encouraged by not just the religious influence on society, but just how society has habituated to its own future as something to grab. We're like an animal that's dying for food, but its food is in the future. A lot of suffering leaves when attitude changes. A person's attitude changes when their image of self to themselves change. Right? I have my image to myself has changed so many times in this life, where I will tell you that my image of others, it's like I'm wise enough now to not judge anyone. Why? Because I know how unknown and vast the intelligence can be. You know, there are dimensions to every human being that by other human beings will never be seen, and this is why the global compassion is necessary. We have to tolerate our attempts at an advanced civilization. And you know, every moment it is a karmic feedback. You know, that means, believe it or not, on some level I can't believe in karma, because I know that there is an interdependency of everything. But in regards to my individual consciousness, which I have logged into this biological body, as you know, the site of ever presence, you know. Our mind is our destination, and to become aware of it means to become conscious of destiny. And a conscious destiny means a freedom from the uncontrollable. You know, I was a bit of a nerd when it came to Vedanta. I really dived into it and was trying to figure out what was being said, and there was something about Sri Ramana Maharshi. He said something incredible. He said there will come a point in this life where all you have learned will be forgotten. That means there's a level of knowledge that is just like what kind of painting you accept over the face of a changing world, and then there's a type of knowledge which in some sense is content with its watchfulness, because the content will go. What does that mean? That means the language, the knowledge, the egoism, all of this is dismissed, and you arise as a witness. And this is why the regret of compassion comes at the end of one's life, where they see how many moments in this reality they could have had the civilization efficiently and smoothly advance. You know, I speak about the lords of karma, but the lords of karma are really the notion of the future. You know, I'm that strange person on this planet who, in some sense, I would say neither the religious community, neither the spiritual community, and neither the secular community can really understand. You know, because I have this vision where it's as if, like, to the spiritual community, I believe in, not believe, but I know I have this experience that there's something else around every person. You know, whether you see it as a probe, whether you see it as a spirit guide, or for me personally, I see it as our future self. That's the only way the spirit guide knows what mistake you're going to make to guide you, because it has lived through it. So the future is in contact with the past through an invisible platform. And this is only possible, you know, if this is how I predict in the future. The future has just time traveled to the past. Why? Because it attained completion. You know, it's like saying, what does truth do? Or it's like saying, it's like saying a mountain climb. What does a mountain climber do after the mountain climber reaches the top of a mountain? The mountain climber climbs down. And so now imagine saying, what does truth and the intelligence do in the universe? You know, when it in some sense goes towards the epitome of creation, it in some sense climbs back down. And so what we don't notice is how many species have made it and how many species haven't, how many types of civilizations have attained collective consciousness, and they're all waiting. You know, but we have not yet achieved that. You know, we're still in the individualism of the gnaw and claws of an animal, you know. in the world we live today, we cannot expect global understanding, of course. And there's also an emotional, I would say, comparison. There are so many types of human beings on this planet that, of course, I mean, the first expectation is failure. The first probability the mind realizes is like, how can I fail? And you see that, then you go towards the success. Because if you don't think about the failure, then the success eventually will come back to it. Simplicity is a point where you observe complexity. The simplest approach is non-existence, strangely, and the most complex approach is infinite existence. Because what else can a species do? What else can biology do? It just has to endure and refuse to become cyber technological in the as long as nature is accessible. We can say a person can hurt others, a person can hurt themselves, and a person can hurt their world. There's 3 types of trying to disturb reality. But what comes as a response and retaliation to the disturbance? Because there could be endless, like a person can try to do something in this life and endless challenges can come. So the only response is just piloting the attention forth to the next moment, to the next moment, to the next moment, until we have awoken from the dream of time. And so I feel people may experience nostalgic moments where it's maybe a fractalization of memory patterns. It could be a sort of ability of intelligence to fathom a new reality, so it calls that truth to acquaint itself and then moves beyond eventually. It's as if we are like a cup that is being filled with water, and before the water hits the brim of the cup expands, the cup expands, the cup expands. And so it's as if consciousness is behind when it comes to how the universe was here first in its expansion. Salvador Dali has this quote. He says, "Do not fear perfection, you will never reach it." The universe, in one verse, has been born to our consciousness. Sometimes I perceive the human being like a balloon also. Why? Because in any moment the human mind can explode. In any moment the inner realms can decide not to be compassionate to the outer realms. And I would say that would be a sort of level of contrast. I don't know how to say it. Like, if I was to compare, a very fast inner realm to someone whose inner realms are slow, for the person whose inner realms are slow, the world doesn't change to them. That means many years of their life they live, and the changing realms context doesn't shift. Right? For me personally, every time I give a talk, the context shifts. But some people live a life where it's like the context of the meaning of their moment goes on lockdown, and so it's as if what they believe about the world, it acts like God to them. Their thoughts, their ideas, their beliefs, how it becomes God. As far as these talks of mine can be helpful, people should always have the discrimination of vision themselves. Sometimes I feel poetry, may not be. I think it's time. I mean, when else can we communicate? Only when we are alive, the human being can communicate. After the person, in the afterlife, the person doesn't know if there is or if they can communicate even in it, if you are a singular or not. It's either we accept emptiness, it's either we accept oneness, or we accept duality, or we accept infinity. If we accept infinity, we have to accept everything. The only reason we have a concept of infinity is because we can't see the edge of the universe. Isn't that phenomenal? Or we can't measure the edge of certain systems of thought. Whether it's language, whether it's numerology, a type of language. The mind dances in the void. That's what existence is, as if breath is causing the brain to simulate. The breath causes the brain to simulate. It simulates until suddenly it notices that it's simulating. The moment it notices it's simulating, it stops the simulation. When it stops the simulation, it has no simulation to identify with, so automatically you become ascribed to the divine will. So what that means is, in voluntary states, we say nature, right? Right now, like, the person doesn't think about their heart beating. They don't say heartbeat, they don't have that attitude towards the heart, right? So you don't think about your heart, but it is automatically happening. And automated functions are ascribed to nature, but from nature, the personality is arose. So when the personality has a relationship with its natural source, it will enter that automation, right? Some people can look at me giving these talks feeling like I'm accessing a trance state. Some people can look at me giving these talks as if I have just returned to the source of nature, to the capacity my vision allows. And so the idea is not to be perfect, because it's impossible, but the idea is to go as far as you can see. That means whoever you are. Let's say if you're someone who is suffering from something, you know, whatever it is, whatever object or subject it is that you're suffering from, you know, you have to wonder about the edge, the complete depth, as if you're pulling the string of a symbol to see what other symbols it is connected to. I want to share for the viewers an artwork I drew, and I want to share with the viewers, you know, from an artistic framework, what is going on in the inner realms when I drew this artwork. As soon as I find it, yeah. Just a second. Okay, there we go. This is an artwork I drew in 2015 called Amorphous Soul. And I want to share with you the state I was in when I was drawing this, right? The state was so simple. It was as if I was watching my mind happen, just like how a person can observe their breathing happen. And in that state, I drew this picture, and the name Amorphous Soul just came for the name of the artwork. Every artwork I draw, usually a name is like the last brush stroke of the artwork, you know? And I'm telling you what it is it's honestly a blank page. But based on our input into reality, it's as if we draw the lines of meaning that end up becoming our destiny. This is another one I drew in 2015. This artwork's called Genesis. And it's all just simplicity, which makes you access the true content of your intelligence. And then through that simplicity, once you have accepted the simple, only the complex is left. You have no other choice. Whoever you are, in whatever simple dimension of any, you know, systematic, you know, approach to life, any system of perceiving reality you're in, if you have experienced its simple dimensions, you're left to the complex. This is like an ultimate argument for all institutions, or you know, ideological institutions, to in some sense update. And what that means is you have given the human being the simple, and the same human being has consumed the simplicity of the realm. Then the complexity is that you need to be a bigger space to access a bigger knowledge. Right, so in order to be that bigger space, you have to transition from the selfhood that you have clinged on, you know. The world is honestly geometry. And if you look at it closely, you'll notice that what's happening with this geometry is that it's moving. So I am totally, like, you can totally define the human being as living geometry, breathing geometry. Geometry where in the space of the unconscious is alive. You know how, like, you know, it's literally like the mind is giving birth to shape. You know, that's a strange way of saying it, but like the mind is like unveiling its masterpiece, its greatest project. And of course, who we kidding? I mean, speaking about something is very easy, but its experience is complex. You know, this is why I brush up on topics, but in some sense, to fully go into a topic means to go into the identity of the archetype that can survive in that space. You know, that means that all that is happening in life is that an evolutionary creature became an antenna for an intelligent activity that was happening regardless of the creature being here or not, right? So in some sense, we think we're on Earth and we need to go heaven. It's wrong. We are in heaven. Earth is coming to us. And so that becomes a sort of relationship with the guy in mind, where one is being honest in regards to their contribution. You know, sometimes for me when I give these talks, they are not just talks. They are sort of like how I am bringing a gift to my waking state, as if the world has its, its laws, its nature, and, the world, especially through the warrior mentality, has dimensions of cruelty in it. But it's as if imagine you experience unfathomable cruelty and you respond with an unconditional love for reality. That means there's some people who they cannot even be violent if they try. Why? Because they have seen what gentleness brings, what intelligence brings, the intelligence of living as a mind in this body with unknown potential, rather than a known body that is thrown around by the shapes of stories. The language wars continue, and 8 billion human beings, we are at war with ideology. We don't realize it. And the way we're at war with ideology, not that there's a right or wrong ideology, but in the sense that there is an identification with what we are not. So whatever move we make is false. It's like, I remember hearing Elon Musk in an interview say something like, if they make you ask the wrong question, they don't have to worry about your answers. So what it means is that the priority in life is to know where your attention needs to be. Now, this has to do with your worldview, and we have pretty much 8 billion human beings, and even new human beings being born, where they will look at the world, have a sort of view of it, and then their response of intelligence is according to that. And so this is why knowledge was power, because as you add dimensions to your worldview, or you perceive the geometry, or the best way to learn things, honestly, this is my personal view, the best way to learn things is just to see what other human beings said on the surface of this rock in the middle of nowhere. That means emptiness is a great teacher. Seldom does ignorance realize it. This song is like hyper emotional. Hold on, guys. Let me see if I can. People don't know this about me, but the name Mr.Within, I actually used it on SoundCloud for I remember there went some time where I shared 10,000 songs in this platform called SoundCloud, like a ridiculous upload level, upload and repost level. Like, I was really, you know what it is? Music is like the rhythm of the world. When you listen to great music, all your suffering for a second just gets teleported away. You get teleported away from all your suffering, and for a second, the moment is perfect. That means you don't see an opera singer sing and then somebody in the audience be like, what did this opera singer say about me? And run to attack the opera singer. You see that the opera is just art. Art is just expression on some level, right? And the way we express suggests how far we have seen. The poet Rumi says, out beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing, there's a place I will meet you there. 8 billion human beings are entrapped in a linguistic simulation that creates bias and prejudice when we think about right and wrong. The only solution is either we incorporate like one strategy, excuse me, one strategy is we incorporate multidimensionalism in the context of human life. So that's the strategy I'm implementing. Now another strategy is reminding the human being of its source, which all the yogis and wisdom traditions are doing, you know. And it ultimately has to do, and another strategy is for human beings to be inspired to step out of their thought form. You know, we say we are a life form, but to the mind, life is a thought in modernity's confusion, right? But what that thought is just how there is image in space. We think in this current time we think we have thoughts. That's such a wrong approach. It's not that we have thoughts. It's just that we are here, and our awareness is a reception, and so we receive as content in this spherical moment of awareness. Shifts. It's as if like the mind is a film. People will understand what I mean. I think now it may be a bit too soon, and people are going to be like, Mr. Within, what are you talking about? But I'll be like, there is an internal cinematic language. What that means is language becomes film behind your eyes, and that film is thought. But when you look at your thoughts, you're actually watching an endless flow of ideology. So every person, if they were silent and still and they understood the value of meditation, they would for a moment in their life just pause and notice that if they don't do anything, what moves? And so your mind begins showing you what it is before you input any definition, task, or whatever to it, right? That means forget about enlightenment, just you're an unknown intelligence here, but look at all the known strategies available and find the great mirror of existence. You know, it's like the roar of the advanced communicators. It's coming. You know, I am like the preview. I'm like the trailer to the advanced civilization. You know, this whole podcast. To be a peaceful human being is key, you know. And when it comes to all the human beings that are bringing new human beings into the system of life, the greatest teaching is gracefulness. I am telling you, the masters, all the masters in history and tradition, even if they were cruel or they were in some sense evil, like if they were good or evil, right? So like there was this show called Ip Man, right? And Ip Man in history is actually Bruce Lee's teacher and is like a patriarch of Wing Chun. And before Ip Man, Wing Chun, the whole fighting martial art, Wing Chun is a type of martial arts, and it was all inspired out of a crane and a snake fighting, right? So martial arts back in the day was inspired by the wilderness of nature, to be honest, right? So we learned from the animals, you know. You know, we learned from the animals how to kick each other's ass. You know, it's like tiger position, you know, mantis position, you know. was a scene in the Ip Man movie where this peaceful martial art master was facing like a greedy, selfish martial art master. And they had this scene where it was incredible directing, where they're pretty much fighting on a table, you know, on a bunch of chairs. Like, it's such a weird room. you know? It's like a martial arts show-off room, you know, but in that scene in Ip Man, it's just like Ip Man's fighting this other martial artist on this table, spinning in the air, and they're both in the air, and they have such precision and technique, you know. You know, but the whole point is that one had a context to the world that I am power, and the other had the context the world is the power, I am here as well. And the one who had that view, they actually are the victors of reality. You know, until a certain phase that history has to go through to record enough chaotic mistakes to then have an ability to stabilize, you know. Talking about history is talking about, it's like acting as if you have a time machine, you know. But in reality, we attempt as far as we can see. It's as if the mind is a light and we shine this light in the darkest corner of our subjective universe. I would like to share some quotes with the audience. And I've pretty much, you know, have a bunch of quotes in front of me right now in regards to just the concept of the divine, just to share with people how people on this planet have perceived the idea of divinity. Alexander Pope: to err is human, to forgive divine. James E. Faust: if there was no right, we would not appreciate, if there was no night, we would not appreciate the day, nor could we see the stars and the vastness of the heavens. We must partake of the bitter with the sweet. There is a divine purpose in the adversities we encounter every day. They prepare, they purge, they purify, and thus they bless. That means the meaning of life is to be conscious of the transformation of the whole universe as you in the moment. Federico Fellini says, if you see with innocent eyes, everything is divine. And that has to do also with simplicity. That's actually a good quote. Walter Savage Landor: there is nothing on earth divine except humanity. Yeah, what other animal is doing what we're doing? We're like the strangest thing here. Pablo Casals: he says music is the divine way to tell beautiful poetic things to the heart. Alan Hamilton: I call horses divine mirrors. They reflect back the emotions you put in. If you put in love and respect and kindness and curiosity, the horse will return that. Lana Del Rey: I believe nothing happens by mistake. You know, the universe has a divine plan. That sounds dramatic. I believe she's a singer. Anyways, Neil Donald Walsh: there's a divine purpose behind everything, and therefore a divine presence in everything. Arthur Rimbaud: only divine love bestows the keys of knowledge. Ludwig van Beethoven: don't only practice your art, but force your way into its secrets. Art deserves that, for it and knowledge can raise man to. Okay, this is not the full quote. The full quote is, don't only practice your art, but force your way into its secrets, for it and knowledge can raise man to the divine. And what Ludwig van Beethoven, this great musician, is saying, he's saying whatever you as a human being, as an art form of your life, are engaging in that art form, whether it's drawing something or whether it's living life day, moment to moment, that could be an art of its own, you know? Like street smart people in marketplaces in like third world and developing countries are like their art is their movement in the moment, or even same with dancers too, I would say. But Ludwig van Beethoven is saying dive deep. That means just be conscious, be aware, and with a sort of simple rationale, go deeply into what the meaning of stuff is. The issue of life is that it's like a forest and our minds are like a lantern in our hand, and we are going in this forest, and as we're walking to the unknown, suddenly society, culture, and the past keeps telling you the story of its own vision, right? So eventually human beings have to quickly get over the past and in some sense go towards the present. Through the present, pilot towards the future. Blaise Pascal says human beings must be known to be loved, but divine beings must be loved to be known. Wow. This quote is next level. This quote was so nice, I'm going to update the video description. There's another quote I want to share. Jonathan Safran Foer, time was passing like a hand waving from a train I wanted to be on. Do you see? That's how the advanced civilization is. It is something that in the inner realms is already there, but in the outer realms that we have to, in some sense, not wake up from the dream, but make the dream a reality. Then we woke up the dream from itself. So an interesting comment, guys, in the chat. So welcome everyone. Wolf says yes, chaos is its own order, transformation at its best. Once you experience and know both, I tend to have a deep appreciation for life and live more abundantly. Yeah. Yeah, but the thing is, when you live abundantly, how much energy do you want to keep putting on the context of the world? That's why we make decisions, because we get tired of all probabilities simulating in the air, So I would say once you make a decision on what the world can be, and you walk towards that, excuse me, that's when karma aligns. Ruth in the chat section says, Mr.Within, you have some great insights. Oh, thanks. I know. I'm joking. But I will be re-listening to this podcast, especially. I hope your messages have not come too late. Okay, so when you say, I hope your messages have not come too late, there's something important there. Late for what? That's the thing. It's emptiness. For a second, consider everything you know about this world is hovering in emptiness. This means freedom instantaneously. This doesn't mean recklessness in the outer realms and not caring for the world. That's how the world has walked so far. But I'm saying it just for a moment means you realize emptiness is your freedom beyond time. So if time was a prison, beyond it you would find that emptiness. Now what happens in that emptiness is it's a raw state of nature's mind and body being in complete harmony. How this happens strangely is when you become selfless. And you can say, well, people have divine experiences in physical turbulence and even in internal turbulence. A person can become so emotional, that a divine experience can happen. Something in life suddenly shakes them, and that is like the sort of, you can say, divine administration, kind of like the cells of the body of the universe kind of aligning. Sometimes justice is just the health of the world trying to remain. There is a story I have to share. There was this very enlightened yogini, this woman who had attained the ultimate vision in human life. And she was walking down this stream back in the day. You think of it as in ancient India. And she's walking on this stream, this gentle stream. And as she's walking in this stream, in this forest, she suddenly sees this glowing red gem in the water. And it's this heart-sized ruby that literally even looks like a heart, let's say, And so she, and it's this heart size, it's this like giant ruby and this giant gem, this rare crystal she finds. And she holds this crystal. And as she goes, she goes to a part of the stream where it gets close to town, and there's this young guy who's struggling in society who is taking bread home, like a loaf of bread. And this person suddenly sees this giant ruby worth a lot of money, in the hand of this yogini, right? And he runs instantly, and he says, "Please give me that ruby," and with intense force, And the person gives the lady, she just smiles and she gives the gem to the person, right? And the whole time she had the gem in her hand, she's like, it's so beautiful. The beauty of the object was way more than its monetary value, in her mind. She saw the beauty first, right? And so the beauty in that object, right? Okay, anyways, so the guy takes the gem. She smiles and she just gives the gem to the person, right? And that person takes the gem and in some sense shoves it in the loaf of bread and runs home, He runs home and gets home, this kind of, karmically turbulent individual. He runs home and he puts the loaf of bread on the table, and he has nothing else in his home, right? And he opens the loaf of bread and the gem is right there. He doesn't care about the bread anymore, And for a moment he's like, "Oh my God, look at this treasure I found." But then he freezes. It's as if his conscience comes to scold him, as if the elders of the realm arrive, So what happens is he's telling himself, "Look at this treasure," but then he goes into this existential shock, and he's like, "Wait a minute, this was of such value, but how could that woman just easily let it go? Let that object go?" And so he realizes, the whole moral of this ancient story is that the guy realizes, "Oh my God, what treasure had that enlightened woman found that he did not see, that he did not have the freedom to let go of the material desires that, blind us of the greater, Enlightenment is beyond human. And if we as a species aim to try to fathom a system beyond humanity, we have to use all the knowledge. It's as if, imagine, when a human being wonders about what we can do in this world, it's as if all the ideas in the world fathomable to the person have become like soldiers, and all the content of the person's mind is at their command. The mind is nature. If this is not realized, there is suffering. Only through a sort of revelation that a universe is alive before we are alive in it. I'll continue with the quote tunnel. Michelangelo, the true work of art is but a shadow of the divine perfection. Iman, he says change makes you find your calling, your legacy, and God's divine plan for your life. Don't run from it. Said Nursi says nature is a divine art. It cannot be the artist. It is a dominical book and cannot be the scribe. It is an embroidery and cannot be the embroiderer. It is a register and cannot be the accountant. It is the law and cannot be the power. So what he means, Said Nursi, here is really that as much as we try to find a transparency of our consciousness with its simultaneity with nature, the outer realms is not the ultimate. So truth is being suggested by ancient wisdom to be within. Ramana Maharshi says the greatest error of a man is to think that he is weak by nature, evil by nature. Every man is divine and strong in his real nature. What are weak and evil are his habits, his desires and thoughts, but not himself. Carolina Herrera, I always remember my childhood house with happy memories. There was a beautiful garden, and outside my bedroom window was a jasmine wine which would open in the evenings, giving off a divine scent. George Louis Borg says to be immortal is commonplace, except for man. All creatures are immortal, for they are ignorant of death. What is divine, terrible, incomprehensible is to know that one is immortal. As a shape, it's horrifying. Shapelessly to know yourself as immortality means that you are the watcher of an endless film. The watcher is not untouched by the film. It can't be. There is no fear after, beyond individualism. James Martino says religion is the belief in an ever-living God that is in a divine mind and will with capital W ruling the universe and holding moral relations with mankind. So if invisible aliens were doing the same thing, you could totally call them gods too. Yeah, like I totally understand. Like it is that, but at the same time we have to understand how many dimensions are we seeing. Because we treat reality in one dimension, in one storyline, we're trying to find one story of truth. We don't see any side angle stories, as if a story, a moment of a character inside a story is like a point, and there's various lines going through that point, vertical, horizontal, diagonal, and so when you look at reality, there is infinite timelines. I'll be honest, it's like saying a person who can visualize something they have seen, so now a person has access to time, and now they're visualizing the time of time, which would mean a branch out of the mainstream of what reality is seen. So I would say, rather than us thinking that reality has time, we should see a world where it has a sort of non-ideological point of being and an infinite objective point of doing. So that means we are movement alongside waves. It's like particles and waves somehow. You know what it is? It's like a battle between particles and waves, and we've woken up in the middle, right? So imagine in ancient Vedic mythology, they would say the Devas and the Asuras. you know, or in Greek mythology we had the gods fighting the titans, right? So the titans are like particles and the gods are like waves, and it's an interdimensional conflict. It's pretty much as if, like, imagine an onion, but one of the onion layers starts to grow bigger than the onion layer, you know. It means a sort of deviation from natural law. That means it's as if, like, if there was galactic police, it would require every galactic sector to have a sort of harmonious relationship. Why? Because the advantage of it is greater. That means imagine doing something that transforms your life in such a great way, and then the whole time you could have done it and you didn't do it. You know what I mean? So it becomes one of those things where I could totally understand why people seek enlightenment, you know? They're trying to find the ultimate moment of meaning. William Blake says, I am in you and you in me, mutual and divine love. Oh my God, that's you know, definitely poetry right there. Swami Shivananda says, always do good to others. Be selfless. Mentally remove everything and be free. This is divine life. This is the direct way to moksha or salvation. Exactly. This quote from Swami Shivananda is like the algorithm, guys. You know, if people don't like what I'm saying, go check out this quote, you know. Like, meditate on this quote. You know, a meditation I would tell people to do is just write quotes on a piece of paper, and then go sit somewhere cross-legged and on the ground so you're humble, you know, and go sit somewhere and just look at those words on a piece of paper and put the words on the piece of paper on the ground and go find a sunny day, you know, and in the sunlight just put a piece of paper, look at that piece of paper and give yourself like 5 to 10 minutes of just like trying to dive deep, put everything on pause in life and just zoom in on what that, you know, imagery points to, you know, because vision is movement. So everything we do, it's ultimately just trying to direct our movement. Like, that's the game of life, how your attention moves in space. And if your attention doesn't align to the collective will, you know, the individual, as known, suffers. You know, if the thing in some sense rejects the individual, like, there's suffering from everything as long as there's a past to have a place to create a burden. That means if people like how in video games the character has an inventory with a certain amount of like slots to fill with items, so similarly imagine the mind has a certain range, you know, like a Wi-Fi router the brain has a certain range of awareness of its environment, right? So in that range of its environment, it has to choose what it's going to be, and it chooses in accordance to all the information that's within its awareness. So the divine finds you in your sight and your simplicity, and your simplicity is just your true sight. Otherworld nostalgia can best be utilized in a cultural way. What I mean by that is that our suffering can become the art of rare moments of history, you know, passing by. That means it's as if, imagine our suffering is historic. The tough lives that people are living right now is historic, you know. Language doesn't have to be reality, and freedom is really a momentary awareness. Anyways, I hope this episode was helpful, and after four more episodes, I think the episodes will become for members only. And thanks for listening, everyone. I want to read one last quote before I end off. Socrates has this quote. He says, "All men's souls are immortal, but the souls of the righteous are immortal and divine." And divinity means your love allows you, your love for life pretty much allows you to access, the divine event that's going on, as if there is an original event that's happening on this earth, and a very unique, energetic, original event. And we have each animated through our own inner realms, which are simulating that event. So we have to step out of our simulations, become content with neutrality, from a state of mind of neutrality, observe what moves, and hence try to have a relationship with divinity. More than ever now, the civilization calls for the advancement of communication. Whoever you are on this planet, you use whatever energy you have towards novelty, because life through one's, how can I tell you, isolation gets a bad rap in modern time, right? Right now it's a sort of corona situation where, like, this Black Plague 2.0 situation, and people are forced to be indoors. Let me tell you what that is the best opportunity for in some sense, advancing life's context through exploration. There is so much information in this world that with enough patience and concentration, anything can be solved. I'm not joking, because the mind has no choice. Whatever it comes to, it will, unless it completely understands it still suffers, right? Because there are some people who their approach to suffering is not to have life change. Their approach to suffering is to increase their understanding to the absolute. Now, what does it mean, the state of absolute understanding? It means a state of subjective freedom. It means a state where you realize that as the objective side of your existence and the subjective side of your experience are the same. And so it's as if, like, discovering the law of the uniformity of nature. Wayne Dyer, I'll read a few more quotes actually, guys. Wayne Dyer says, "One of the most important decisions you'll ever make is choosing the kind of universe you exist in. Is it helpful and supportive, or hostile and unsupportive? Your answer to this question will make all the difference in terms of how you live your life and what kind of divine assistance you attract." Hirohito says, "They do not depend on mere legends and myths. They are not predicated on the false conception that the emperor is divine and that the Japanese people are superior to other races." Now, I understand this idea, because our globalist, compassionate modernity is in some sense nullifying the uniqueness of every tradition. So this was a problem where I was thinking, how would an advanced civilization bypass global nationalism, which pretty much means we've just drawn lines on a sphere, and we've in some sense have been fighting over it, So what will happen to the evolution of nations, let's say 200 years, 400 years, 500 years from now? And I thought the best approach could be, in some sense, that all nations remain. We don't try to change the past. We allow the past to be whatever it has been, and we give the past freedom. But what we do is we put the word SUB dash So sub-nations. So that means all nations become, like right now I'm in Canada, in that future time, hypothetical thought experiment, it would be like it would be a world where there would be like sub-Canada, sub-Iran, sub-China, sub-Russia, sub-France, sub-Italy. Do you know what I mean? Like that means nations would become, it's as if a greater spherical onion layer has come over the structure of how the past has functioned. So it's like pretty much ingenious, where we're like, whatever past ideological systems are doing, all right, keep doing it, but the advanced civilization, there's so much space in this world that the advanced civilization gets built. So Mr. Within's strategy is, while civilization 1.0 is sadly walking to its depressing future, civilization 2.0 is starting. And civilization 2.0 is starting from an inner position, because if there was an advanced, if 8 billion human beings right now were teleported to an advanced civilization for a nanosecond, or they just were teleported there, that advanced civilization would be beyond whatever framework we held ourselves through. Right? So I am saying that in the future can lead to actually a dissolution of suffering, in the sense that our response to it is the meaning of our life. Radhanath Swami says the true treasure lies within. It is the underlying theme. Alright. Isaac Newton. Gravity may put the planets into motion, but without the divine power, it could never put them into such a circulating motion as they have about the sun. And therefore, for this, as well as other reasons, I am compelled to ascribe the frame of this system to an intelligent agent. That's a very classy thing for Isaac Newton to say, right? In the sense that he's saying, all right, I have this theory on reality, but it also appears to me that some background intelligence is moving things. Confucius says, study the past if you would divine the future. Marcus Terentius Varro says, divine nature gave the fields, human art built the cities. Thomas Carlyle, of all acts of man, repentance is the most divine. The greatest of all faults is to be conscious of none. Paramahansa Yogananda, hypnotism is trespass into the territory of another's consciousness. It's temporary phenomena having nothing in common with the miracles performed by men of divine realization. Yeah, and guess what is hypnotizing us? Our society. The culture and the world we have built is the hypnotism. It is the story we go through, and what choice do we have? That means Paramahansa Yogananda was inside a hypnotism telling people that they were hypnotized. And that is in some sense the reality, and of course the vision. Of course, Paramahansa Yogananda, he shouldn't care for hypnotism in some sense, if it is in some sense everything. That means imagine the whole world is an illusion. What do you do? That means non-hypnotism, hypnotism, all of it is an illusion. Sharing imagery is why we have minds. And nature, of course, corrects itself. So to have an approach where you do not expect anything, yet you are walking in the moment, what greater liberated state than the unknown can there be? So any known attempt at life is an illusion. Any known attempt at life is a flaw. The unknown is by itself true. So that what I mean is that yogis are gods angry at humans. They are God complexities. You know, let's say we say people have an inferiority complex and a superiority complex. The yogic mind has a supremacy complex. And the supremacy complex means that man has a relationship with divinity, and he feels that he can tell nature what to do. But if people realize that they are nature and the only approach is through a mirror, if somehow people just start throwing mirrors everywhere, the whole civilization will self-reflect. Upon self-reflection, it is more like piloting the attention, you know, rather than the turmoil of ignorance. For me, all religious ideology is a way of realizing you don't exist first. It's dehumanized truth. Religion is dehumanized truth. That means the moment you have divinity in the picture, who cares about the human being? You know? Who cares how violent and cruel we are to human beings when there's divine law, like, you know? And, you know, like, there's yogis thinking, you know, there's hypnotism. I mean, like, that civilization is this giant program where the winners are writing it. And alongside what the winners write, every person has their own unique meaning extraction from the moment. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin says, for me, the Immaculate Conception is the feast of passive action, the action that functions simply by the transmission through us of divine energy. Purity, in spite of outward appearances, is essentially an active virtue because it concentrates God in us and on those who are subject to our influence. Shri Chinmoy says, ours is a divine journey. Therefore, this journey has neither a beginning nor an end. The journey has a goal, but it does not stop at any goal, for it has come to realize that today's goal is only the starting point to tomorrow's journey. Yeah, that's what life is, endlessly waking up to tomorrows until it ends, you know. It's like the person's like, oh my god, are you telling me I have woken up this many times on this planet? Like, that's ridiculous, you know. It's like, you know, some people get awakened, you know, after years and years of meditation, and some people get awakened every morning, you know, like, you know, they're both are enlightening, you know. Wayne Dyer says, within all of us is a divine capacity to manifest and attract all that we need and desire. Yeah, but sometimes you shouldn't want what you desire. You know, a desire is a probability of biological conviction, right? That means it's like we can't forget that this is an animal that responds to, like, what our body is an animalistic function that responds to the environment, and it has a sort of hormonal system going on. It has a sort of it has endless types of feedback loops in regards to how the environment is, right? So if a person goes into a nice environment, the only way they know it's nice is because their biological system, their sensory perception, is providing them with that information, right? The feedback of their body in response to the space-time continuum is their feelings, you know. And so to even go beyond emotion, you know, it's a strange domain where, because on some level we gotta shield duality, you know, even though people want to get rid of their egos, like people want to like act like their egos, you know, but there is no conquering in the space-time continuum because it's emptiness. You know, that means for the first time we have found, if we were 8 billion like soldiers on a battlefield, for the first time we have found emptiness. In emptiness, there is a sort of complete nullification of belief. like, what can I say? You know, it's like we are, as Marshall McLuhan and Buckminster Fuller would say, we are spaceship Earth. We are on spaceship Earth. We're literally, this planet is our spaceship, and people, the crew members, are not behaving accordingly. You know, and crew members does not mean a dictatorship or a messed up political system. It just means for the first time let humanity rekindle a royal honor, but an honor of the greater potential of the future. That means we are seeing the future so advanced that we don't care to go one step ahead or two steps ahead. Everybody is running as far as they can. You know, that's the type of an advanced civilization. That means in the future, our civilization would be so advanced and busy that if extraterrestrials tried to invade us, they'd be like, why aren't human beings noticing us about to invade them? And they'd suddenly see we're super busy, right? And the aliens come down to Earth and they're like, hey, human beings, don't you notice like all our space fleet about to like invade your planet? And an advanced communicator would say, we know you're already here, don't disturb us. We are doing something way more advanced than you can understand, you know? And then the extraterrestrial is just shocked and they all leave, you know? One of them maybe stays, you know, but all of them leaves, you know? And so what happens is, an advanced civilization is the first attempt to try to build heaven, to bring paradise onto Earth, to build an Earth heaven, to build an Earth that we are so in a grand honor. That means it's as if like it was like the way I sometimes fathom Guru Padmasambhava felt when he was walking in this world. You know, this man was like in you could say Tibetan mysticism. He's a figure, he's a person, he's a being, an enlightened being, where from the higher dimensions he has just manifested into this world. Now this manifestation of Guru Padmasambhava I sometimes feel that when he walked this earth, he would just see people and not see good or bad people. He would just see those who are aware of the light in the room or not. That means suffering is from darkness, let's say, right? But if you realize humanity is divine in the sense of like we are the mover here, right? We are like the camera that's recording everything, our moment, and there is a significance to this. That means whatever archetype you've been functioning in, like an Iron Man suit or a giant robot suit, you know, or a giant robot, you know, beyond ideology, novelty invites or introduces new universes. I'm telling you, we're not a conceptual, subjective character in a storyline. We are a moment happening, as simple as that. And when you realize that, creativity sparks, and eventually you have to, I don't say you have to, but at some point the pilot has to choose a destination to fly to, and that becomes the honor of the lifetime. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. Namaste.